Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Pack Scout Unpacking. Today, what I'm going to be doing is going through the state of recycling in the US report that the Recycling Partnership published at the beginning of the year. It is absolutely fascinating. And it's fascinating because the numbers are incredibly depressing. I don't know who has read the report, but to give you a brief overview over some of the findings that we have, 21% of recyclable material is actually recycled in the US. 3% of what is lost at the MRFs, but 76% of the material that could be recycled but is not recycled is lost at the household level. So we as independent consumers, despite all of our conversations when we say, oh, the brands need to change the packaging and this needs to be more recyclable or more sustainable or better for me, are kind of dropping the ball when it comes to actually putting the things that can be recycled into the correct stream. Now, one of the things that this results in is that we're not giving waste a chance to be recycled. So if I don't put it into the waste stream, the correct recycling stream, then there is no chance it's going to get recycled. There's no magic solution that comes along and picks up trash or litter that we drop around and then puts it into the correct stream. So if you don't litter, and it's very odd to have these conversations sometimes, but if we keep things very simple, if I don't throw it into the trash and if I don't throw it onto the ground, it has a chance to be recycled. So if I put it into the correct stream, it has an opportunity to be recycled, reclaimed, reused in some way. If I throw it on the ground, it doesn't. So litter is 100% a human problem. So all these conversations when we look at plastic or packaging ending up in the water, ending up in the ground, 9 out of 10 times there's been a human error in it. So if I dump my stuff onto the ground, then I can't be particularly surprised if it ends up in the waterway because it's not going to end up in the recycling stream. So to take a kind of a quick look at one of the other aspects that the report showed very clearly, which is very interesting, there's only 27% of the US don't have access, of all households in the US, do not have recycling access. Now, that could be for a number of reasons. But if we take the fact that essentially 1/4 of us have the excuse to not recycle and we don't actually have access to recycling, that's fair enough. However, the 73% of us who do have access are in a position where we can make a very significant impact. So that 21% could easily be 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%. Now, all that would require is that the people who in the multifamily households, that 37% who have access, to make a bigger impact on their recycling, and then the 85% of the single family groups to continue to keep as much of it as possible in the recycling chain. Another interesting statistic that came out of it was that only 50%, 37% of recyclable materials are getting into the recycling stream through curbside recycling. So that means that almost half of the potential materials that are recyclable, so these are materials that there's not even a question about their ability to be recycled, they're just not being put into the recycling stream. Some of these are quite fascinating. Glass containers, 62% of glass containers are recycled, but 38% of them are trashed. Now, if you think about that for a moment, a glass container is completely recyclable, like very easily so. It saves enormous amounts of energy and cost by recycling them. There are, of course, some caveats in terms of you're not going to get necessarily a transparent, where you can't get a transparent glass container if you recycle one that has a different color in it, and they might all end up looking brown in the end because over time the color gets a bit kind of brown. But ultimately, and just for simplicity's sake, like a glass container can just continue to be broken down, recycled, broken down, recycled. And that's bad as a statistic. So less than two-thirds of less than in fact, yeah, less than two-thirds of glass containers are even being put into the recycling stream, and they are 100% recyclable. But then when it comes to cans, aluminium cans and steel cans less than 50%, 53% is trashed. Aluminium cans, 45% is trashed. Now, this is a product that, in the case of the cans, the aluminium cans, you can take a can, a beverage drinking can, use it, recycle it, have it back on a shelf in 60 days. That's been one of the key points that that industry has been making for at least the last 15 years. I'm sure it's been longer, but certainly in the last 15 years, they have been able to take that can and put it back on a shelf in 60 days. And yet, we're only giving them 45% of the material every time it's being used. We're like, here, have half of those cans back to reuse and recycle and put back into the stream. Whereas when you're making it from a virgin material, it's incredibly energy intensive and costly. So it's just a complete waste of money to not even put the entirely recyclable materials back into the stream. So here is the area that needs the most support, because if we're only putting 57% of the materials in that actually can be recycled anyway, we're just leaving ourselves open to a real problem in the future where we can only recycle the materials that is recyclable, and if we're not putting them into the stream, then they can't be recycled. So what can I do? I mean, again, it's odd to have this conversation, but first things first, don't litter. If you're in doubt about something, recycle it, don't trash it. Lead and don't follow. Don't wait for somebody to suggest to you an action you can take today, because something you do today, anything you do today, any small step you take today is just going to help that future and that tomorrow to be better. Understand the access. It is well worth all of our time to get information from our local government, municipalities, about how things are being recycled, and to make requests for information to get them to provide you with the tools so that you can recycle, so that we can make sure that that quarter of people who don't have access have some access, if not complete access, and that the people who do have access are given the tools to understand what can be recycled, what is a recyclable material, making sure that they put it into the correct stream so that it has the chance to be rekept. And then making sure that we get involved, keeping the local government accountable, because if I'm going to be accountable to raise the recycling rates in my own home, which is what this report is suggesting will make the biggest impact, I need to make sure that my efforts are not being undone by a lack of access or something happening that is stopping my good deeds from being punished because it can't be recycled in some way. So I hope that's been helpful. Of course, if there's any questions ever from anybody, please always let me know. And in the meantime, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this Hack Scout video. Thank you.